What's up, fellas? It is another fine Monday. Hope you guys all had a great weekend. And man, it's the end of 2020 almost. What is today? Like the 28th or something? Yes, December 28th, which means that next week's episode is, of course, a virtual fly-in day, which is always fun for everyone. Sorry if it looks like I'm not looking at the camera, it's because I'm looking at the chat, which is there. So, want to give a quick hello to everybody. Hello, Kenny, F.U., Mr. Victor Shameless, George Watts, hello, sir, David Snyder, Jordan Dowell, happy Christmas to everybody, Merry Christmas. A few days ago, hope everybody got some cool Christmas presents. Pilot Ryan, welcome to another Monday night. This is episode number 53, and today we are going to do a rundown of what is, in my opinion, some of the best models that have come out in 2020. And as you guys know, the pickings were a little slim this year, so it's probably not hard to guess what I've got on there. And I'll try to keep up with the chat and everything. In fact, I'm just going to move a bunch of stuff around real quick because it looks weird when I'm looking at it the way I am right now. Uh-oh. So, anyway, hope everybody got a good weekend, had a good Christmas. Share with us all of the cool presents that you guys got. Hopefully some folks got some new airplanes. And maybe we'll see, yeah, I mean, 2020 was a decent year for RC, I think, in general. I think that there were a lot of things that were held back this year because of the Rona. And I think that, for the most part, I think 2021 is going to be an even better year. So that still kind of has yet to be seen. We'll see. We can all hope. We can all hope and dream. Now, damn it. All right. So I'm having to change a few things in OBS right now. Man, Shadow, I don't even want to get into the FAA BS. Like, look, we at least I believe most of you guys probably got the email today that the new remote ID regulations have come out from the FAA. It's like 490 pages or something. I mean, it's big. It's big, fellas. Let's see. 470 pages of crap to sift through. So I am going to have to read through it, digest it, come up with my opinion. In fact, we may skip the fly-in next week because I do think that it's a topic that needs to be discussed, and what better way to kick off the new year than to, to jam right into some heavily debated topics like remote ID. Ugh. So, man, what a mess. I'm sure that that's going to create a lot of issues for a lot of folks. I don't like it. I wish that they just get rid of the whole thing, but what can we do, I mean, as if you're gonna play the game, you should play by the rules, right? But I think that a lot of folks are just going to be outlaw pilots. There's going to be a lot of outlaw pilots. Now, there's still 60 days. I did see some things in there where they had specific comments from flight test and stuff like that, and their retort to those comments and how the FAA feels about it. So, I'm not gonna go there yet. It doesn't mean I'm not gonna say anything about it. I'm sure that I will have something to say, just not today. Not today, fellas. So, I'm trying to get OBS set up to do what I want to do today and make sure that we've got all of the good stuff happening there so we can, talk about things that are fun instead of things that suck. All right. Yeah, right. So I get it, man. I see a lot of stuff in there about unmanned aircraft and drones and what do we do if it's homemade and blah 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 blah. I mean, and that's why I'm saying I gotta read through it to see, I'm one of those guys that likes to read through this kind of stuff and figure out where the loopholes are, if there are any. And maybe there's something in there that gives us a break. But it's not looking that way from what I've read so far. We're going to have some kind of remote ID device. But how big those devices are, how much they're going to affect the airplanes, what is the price on those things? Do we still have to call and file a flight plan if we're flying at a field? What's the deal? And right now, I don't think that anybody has the answers for that, man. So it is what it is. I mean, we can all debate, till the cows come home what it should be, but the fact is that the rule is out now. It's 470 pages of documentation. At this point, all we can do is get involved with our legislators, our senators, our congressmen, whatever, if they even give a damn, and see if they can force the hand of the FAA to make changes. Now, there are some lawsuits out there that were kind of pending this regulation, specifically from Race Day Quads. I know that Race Day Quads has a lawsuit against the FAA that they're trying to get them to change their mind on a few things, but we'll see how far that goes. We'll see what happens, fellas. All right, so tonight I want to get into a much better topic that has nothing to do with the FAA, and that is talking about what are, in my opinion, some of the best planes that have come out for the 2020 flying season. So, first off, let's see in the chat, what do you guys think the best model was? And I'll tell you, I don't think that the way that I have them listed, the way that we're going to go over them, it's kind of a top 10 of what I think the best models for 2020 were. And they're not in any particular order. But what do you guys feel like the best birds were for 2020. And Micah, I see it that you made in that 1.2 meter, 1.2 meter T-28. I told you it flies awesome, man. What were you worried about? Now, it doesn't have safe, but I don't know that safe would have helped you with the nose gear anyway. Oh, no. It had to do with a tree. When the canopy flew off and I got distracted watching it. Oh, man. Sorry to hear that, buddy. Is it still in the tree? Did it fall out? Did it take a bunch of damage? That really sucks, dude. Yes, I agree. The T-33 did start the year off great. And that is definitely on the list that I'm going to go over tonight. So let's get over to it. Hold on.
Sorry, I'm not sure about that.
Stupid Alexa thinks I'm talking to her. All right. I don't know that the Aero Scout was a 2020 airplane. I think the mini Aero Scout, the little UMX version of the Aero Scout, was a 2020 airplane, but I believe the Aero Scout was a 2019 airplane, so I don't have that on the list. But let's go ahead and talk about what is on the list. All right. So the first plane that we are going to talk about today is boom, the E-flite Night Timber X. And we're going to talk about why I think that it's one of the best of 2020. I mean, y'all's opinion is great. And this is my show. It's my opinion. So, Night Timber X, man. The reason that I think the Night Timber X deserves a spot on this list, right, is it kind of paved the way for what we can expect to see in the Draco when it comes out, right? If it was the first plane that they did. It was a STOL plane. Yes, it uses that proven timber platform that has a bottom feeder battery that makes us all upset. But they did a couple of really neat things here. Number one, it's got smart technology throughout the plane, right? Which is great for those of us that like that thing, right? And it's, I want to say either the third or fourth airplane they had that had the full smart package with all of the telemetry and everything that you get. Some other really neat things that they did with the Night Timber X, and the reason that I think it deserves a spot on the list is it was the first plane that E-flite did, and they had another one either right before or right after, but I think it was right after. It gets them back into that night deal where I think all of the planes they had that were fully illuminated, and they've had some in the past that were really cool, but this was the first, kind of the return of, you know, that big, fully illuminated, kind of glow-in-the-dark airframe. When you turn the lights on, it's really cool. It's got all the telemetry, and it has thrust reversing. And the reason that thrust reversing is cool to me is they do it all through the SRXL2 serial protocol. So they don't have to have two throttle wires, and you're flipping back and forth between two inputs on your receiver. The way that they have it set up is very cool, or you don't have to have like a mode switch that's programmed into your receiver to tell it like, okay, now you're in reverse, now whatever. You don't have to have two plugs going into your receiver. It uses a single throttle channel, and through the SRXL2 protocol, I can reverse that throttle and have thrust reversing, which I think was very innovative by the team at E-flite and Spectrum and Horizon as a whole, and it kind of paves the way ahead for what we should expect to see in the Draco when it comes out. We're going to have that same smart technology, the same thrust reversing, and, you know, updates came later on in the year. This was kind of a preview of what was to come. As the updates came later in the year, we were, we received updates where by updating those smart ESCs, I can now program those ESCs from my transmitter. I no longer need like a dedicated program box, which I think is really neat. And I can also add that thrust reversing, to ESCs that are already on the market just with a simple software upgrade, which is awesome. And it's something that I've done on both my PC-21 and my Commander MPD. I have added thrust reversing to both of those, not because I need it, but because I can. And it's cool to taxi backwards, even if you don't use it for anything else. Now, I think specifically for like the Night Timber X, it's great because one of the areas where I think thrust reversing is really going to shine as we start to see it come on more and more models is on planes that have floats. So if you've got a float plane, you guys know that trying to water taxi can be a bit of a beast. Water rudders do great, but sometimes you get in a situation where the bird is like, you're affected by set and drift of the body of water that you're in. So the airplane can just be moving and you may try to taxi forward, but sometimes having that thrust reversing on a float plane is going to be great. And up to this point, at least from recent memory, I think the Grand Tundra from Hobby King has been one of the few that have had thrust reversing on a float plane. So I think we can expect to start seeing that on future float planes that come out from E-flite. So I think that that's some really cool innovation, and that's why the Night Timber X is on my best of 2020 list. All right. So, yes, random maneuvers in the air indeed. All right, so next up on the list, y'all, is one that I know for a fact at Jet Jam this year, we saw this plane all over the place, and that is the Freewing T-33. So, the Freewing T-33, this was a model that I think a lot of people wanted. And we got two awesome T-33s this year. One from Freewing, I think a little earlier this year. And actually, as we continue through the list, you're going to see a lot of duplicates because there were a lot of things that were released this year that multiple manufacturers hit on it. So, yeah, the T-33, that's a pretty special plane. And when you get into, planes that handle really well and have, and I want to say this was one of the first that was released right out of the gate with an in-runner without it being a high-performance plane, right? It wasn't like it came with an outrunner initially, and then they changed it to high performance, and now it includes an in-runner. The T-33 was one of the first planes they did. This one had the 80 millimeter in-runner right out of the gate. So, the performance of that in-runner and the fan unit, the size of the airplane, everything about it just it hit on all cylinders, and it happens to fly fantastic. It's got great landing gear. The way that they did the landing gear doors, those scale doors, I think the way that they close up and it really cleans up on the bottom is awesome. So the Freewing T-33, I think that was a great plane. That was a great addition. So, between and it added another model to a list that Freewing has kind of become, known for people that want to get into like their first 6S EDF. Now we've got the Avanti S, which, if you've never flown one, even if you don't like sport jets, you owe it to yourself to try an Avanti S at some point because it's such an awesome platform. But now we've got the Avanti S, we've got the F-86, we've got the L-39, And now we can add that T-33 to the list of just awesome EDFs for people that are just getting started into 6S EDFs. I wouldn't necessarily recommend them as first EDFs. I think that there's better choices as a first EDF, but your first big 6S, I think that those are all fantastic choices, and it's another just great airplane that Freewing has added to their arsenal of growing EDFs. And we're gonna see some more Freewing stuff here later. So the Freewing T-33 makes the list for best models of 2020, according to Dave. Now, next on the list, and remember, this is in no particular order. Next on the list is the big HSD T-33. Now, this was another one that I got to see a lot of at Jet Jam. And, you know, one of the reasons that I like the big HSD T-33 is is it super innovative? No, it's not super innovative. I mean, it's an HSD plane, but what I think the HSD T-33 brings to the table is it, for guys that are in that kind of transitional period in their hobby where they want to, go from, say, your 80 and 90 millimeter EDFs up to bigger models. I think that HSD kind of hits that sweet spot of big models, where this is a 120 millimeter EDF unit. It runs on 12S. It's a big, big beast. So I think where I like where the T-33 sits as far as its position is it's a nice transition point between electric EDFs and turbines. So if you're wanting to get into turbines, I think that the HSD foam lineup is an awesome transition point, and I think that the T-33 from HSD was an awesome addition. Sorry, we're going to get a lot of dogs. There's people delivering food, and they're going to get pissed off, and there's nothing I can do about it. Sorry, fellas. I'll be right back. Sorry, I had to go yell at some dogs. All right, so yeah, the T-33 I think is a good addition to the list. It's a great, it's one of those transitional models, and we've all got our favorites where, I have a few prop planes that I think like this is the prop plane you need to fly right before you go to EDFs. And there's a lot of really good transitional airplanes. This is one that's great to start with as your first trainer plane. This is a good transition from trainer into warbirds. This is a good transition from 1-to-1. And the HSD T-33, I think, is one of those good transition airplanes where if you want to go to a turbine aircraft, I think that HSD T-33 really scratches that itch real well. And that is why the HSD T-33 is on my list of one of the best planes of 2020. Next up on the list, Jeff, I have not flown the HSD T-33, but I have seen the HSD T-33 being flown on many, many occasions. And I can definitely attest to the fact that it flies very well. All right. So, next up on the list is another plane that I have grown to really enjoy this year, even though I crashed one. Oh well. and that is the Arrows RC Mig-29. So with 2 Mig-29 releases this year, I mean, they're just so you know, there might be another Mig-29 on this list. But I like the Arrows Mig-29. I think of the two like twin 64s this year. I mean, a lot of folks have had motor problems with the E-flite A10. I have not personally flown the E-flite A10. I think that between like the twin 64 E-flite A10 and the twin 64 Freewing A10, I think the E-flite is probably the better of the two. But as far as A10s go, I personally like the FMS 70mm A10. I think that is, if I was going to get an A10, I think that's where I would go. I mean, I love the Arctic camo, number one, and I think it's a little, I don't want to say better built because I think they're both FMS models. I mean, just being honest. But I think that the 70mm, to me, it seems like it flies better, you know. So the FMS A10 would be my winner between those. But I don't know if the FMS A10 came out this year or if it was last year. If it was this year, then sadly it's not on the list. And I probably should have looked and seen when the FMS A10 was released, because I really like the Twin 70 FMS. But for the Twin 64, I think the Twin 64, the Arrows Mig-29, this thing is a great flying model. I wrecked it because I was stupid. But when you fly it well, this model actually flies fantastic. Does it have some quirks? Yes, just like the big Mig-29, it does have some quirks. But I think that overall, you know, this was a release from Arrows that I think kind of, you know, I don't want to say like solidified them or propelled them into a different category of airplane, but of the Arrows planes that I've seen so far, the Mig-29 is absolutely the one that I was most impressed with, and that's followed up pretty closely by like the Arrows Husky. I think the Arrows Husky is also an awesome plane, especially when you're talking value proposition. What you get for the money with the Arrows Husky is awesome. But I think that the Arrows Mig-29 is an awesome airplane, and even after wrecking it and putting it back together, you know, I've flown it a couple of times since then. Yes, it's got some weird tendencies, you know, but overall, I think that once you can get past those, with the way that it, you know, kind of has a bit of a nose down attitude when it's sitting on the landing gear. So, I mean, you got to have a pretty lengthy runway. You got to have some good speed, whatever. But once you get past that, I think that once you get it up in the air, that's one of my, and it may be because of the way that I like to fly airplanes. I like the way that the Mig-29 flies through the air. It's got a bit of a drifting style to it, where the tail end kind of slides, and it's just a fun plane for me. And when you get everything kind of hitting on all cylinders with that airplane, it's one of the most fun planes that I've had in 2020. So, Arrows Mig-29, next on the list. All right. Makes my list for the best models of 2020. All right, next up on the list, and this one I'm sure will be met with some criticism because of the amount of documented or complaints, not really documented complaints, but man, there's been a lot of complaining, but there's been a lot of really high praise too, and that is the Freewing Mig-29. affectionately called the Big 29 by a lot of folks. You know, after Pilot Ryan calls it the Big 29. Randy, were there any German planes released in 2020? We're just talking about 2020. All right. So the Freewing Mig-29. Number one, the presence of this plane is amazing. It's a big plane, big twin 80, one of the most powerful planes that Freewing has released, period. Even more so, you know, from just a pure power perspective, more so than the Tomcat when it was released, more so than the A10. I mean, this thing just has gobs and gobs of thrust to just power it through the air. And when I think of the two, you know, kind of fourth gen Russian big jets, you know, I think of the E-flite Su-30 and the big, you know, Freewing Mig-29. And I think between those two, the Mig-29 is a much better flying model. So the Freewing Mig-29, yeah, there's been some folks that have had elevator issues, but the same can be said for the Freewing F-18. And when you, and again, I don't know total sales numbers. How many people really had problems with the F-18? Some people did, and they were legitimate. I'll give you that. Some people are having elevator issues with the Mig-29, and they're legitimate, and I'll give you that. But there's a lot of people that are having problems with the elevator on the Mig-29 because they either didn't set the plane up right, or they just don't know how to fly big EDFs. Which, this is some, you know, it's the sad reality of our hobby. As airplanes, you know, get lower and lower in cost, and you get much higher performance with lower cost, I think that there's a lot of folks that get into really big planes that are outside of their piloting ability that they have no business flying. And I think that the Mig-29 probably falls into that category for quite a few people. And there may have been a lot of accidents with the Mig-29 that were directly related to their lack of ability of flying an RC airplane than the plane itself. And that's just the harsh truth, man. What can you say? Yeah, it does have aerodynamic quirks, Nate. And I think that that's one of the things that you know, that people need to understand. You know, that this plane, and they're not lost on the Aeros Mig-29. Almost everything from an aerodynamic perspective that affects the big Freewing Mig-29 also affects the little Aeros Mig-29. You know, so you have to be, I don't want to call it well, yeah, I will. I'll say that you need to be, I don't know, heavy intermediate / advanced EDF pilot before you jump into either one of the Mig-29s. You know, they fly different. There are some planes that are not for people that are just getting into EDFs or maybe only have one or two. You need to have EDF experience under your belt to be able to be successful with these kinds of planes. But that doesn't take away from what I believe is one of the best planes of 2020, and that is, again, the Freewing Mig-29. You know, EQ, I don't think that thrust vectoring is a must on the Mig-29 or the Gripen. And we'll talk about that, you know, a little later. But you can absolutely do some amazing aerobatics with the Mig-29 without thrust vectoring. I mean, yes, that thing will absolutely get into some flat spins. Let me tell you, the elevator, or not the elevators, but the twin rudders on the Mig-29 are absolutely effective. Ask people that have a Freewing F-22 that fly the crap out of it. You know, can you do a falling leaf flat spin with an F-22? You bet you can. You don't need thrust vectoring. You know, can you do crazy flips without thrust vectoring on a MiG-29? Absolutely. You can do some really neat stuff with this airplane. Will thrust vectoring bring a new element to the flight dynamics and make it do more stuff than it can do out of the box? Sure. And I'm sure it'll be great. But the MiG-29 out of the box without thrust vectoring is still an amazing aircraft, and I highly recommend it. Scott Settle, what is up? Welcome to the show. All right, next on the list, and this one is a fairly newcomer to the list, and I have not flown one yet, but man, everything that I've seen on it, I am very impressed with it. I definitely want one. I just don't have one yet, and that is the HSD Cessna 182. So we're going to mix it up a little bit. It's not all jets, fellas. It's not all jets, and it's not all big airplanes either. There might be a UMX in here somewhere. So that HSD Cessna 182, what a great looking airplane. Just from appearance alone, that is one of the most scale, best looking Cessna 182 models that I've seen yet from any manufacturer. And it's big. It's got that big, you know, I can't remember if it's 2 or 2.1 meters. It's a big plane. Kenny will tell us, I'm sure, because Kenny has one. I mean, what an amazing airplane. It's great looking. The lights on it are fantastic. The presence of that airplane in the air, I mean, that looks like a real Cessna, especially if you're flying at scale. It's just an amazing looking airplane and well worthy of being on anybody's list of the best models that have come out in 2020. You know, there are certain airplanes that are classics, and when people make these models and they make it crappy, it just puts a real bad taste in my mouth, right? And I think that the Cessna airframe, you know, especially when you're talking like their high wing trainer style, so like the 150, the 172, 182, those are just classic airframes. And if you're going to do it, you need to do it justice. And, you know, from the wings to the windows to the lighting, the wheel pants, the gear, the way that the front gear articulates when you exercise the rudder, that 182 is an amazing model, in my opinion. And there's not much that I can complain about it from a third-person perspective. I have not had the opportunity to see or fly one yet, but everything that I have seen from other people's channels would suggest that that is an amazing, amazing airplane, and I can't wait to try one out myself. So, Cessna 182 HSD jets. Buy it today on HSD Jets USA. They are back in stock, and you can get one right now. So go there today, HSD Jets USA, and buy you a Cessna 182. They're awesome. It's drugs. It is, man. It's a great looking airplane. All right. So next up on the list, man. And you know, this goes from we're going from one of the bigger airplanes on the list in that Cessna 182 to one probably one of the smallest airplanes on the list, and that is the E-flite UMX Turbo Timber. So, I mean, we're plowing right through this, guys. I mean, it's 8:40. We've only got a few more airplanes to go, but I want to have some time to, you know, just shoot the breeze with you guys too. So I'm just plowing through the list. Man, the UMX Turbo Timber. I mean, everybody remembers the UMX Timber. The UMX Timber, even if you don't like the Timber, even if you don't like the Turbo Timber, the UMX Timber was one of those airplanes that, like, it was the biggest surprise of, you know, my time in flying RC airplanes. How amazing that plane handled. And, you know, while the UMX Turbo Timber, you know, basically takes a lot of those same design cues and refines them and makes them better, I think the addition of the 3-bladed propeller, the addition of the higher KV motor, so I think we're sitting at like 300 more KV on this motor than with the UMX Timber. The change from the old electronics to the new electronics, so now I've got flight battery telemetry that comes back to my radio, which is very convenient for me. I like it because I use those call outs. I think it's more efficient, and anybody that's flown or even seen one of the UMX Turbo Timbers, you have to agree that for a UMX, this is a crazy good flying airplane. They're a ton of fun. It's one of those airplanes that everywhere I go, I bring it with me, man. You can take this thing and hand launch it anywhere and be flying in seconds. It's so easy out of the box. Excuse me. Woo! Bless me. It's such a fun little plane, man. What can you say wrong about the UMX Turbo Timber? Man, what an awesome flying airplane. You can take that thing off in like 6 inches. I mean, it just, boom! It's up in the air and going. It's a load of fun. The lights on it are fantastic. I mean, if you know how to fly a plane just with navigation lights alone, the UMX Turbo Timber is absolutely capable of being flown in pitch black dark because it's got such bright lighting. The navigation lights, the wing beacons, everything about that plane is awesome. It's, for what it is one of the most awesome planes in that category. I mean, who's making a better UMX plane than the UMX Turbo Timber? That thing is amazing. It's a great little plane. It was just on sale for $109, and if you guys missed that sale, you know, I'm sorry. But even at $139, I still think that it's well worth it, and you guys should definitely check it out. Links are in the description. Links are in the description. Go to Horizon. Use my link. Go to Horizon. Get you a UMX Turbo Timber. They're fantastic. All right. Yeah, the Ultrix. The Ultrix is good, and I think that the Ultrix was released in 2020, and it didn't make the list. And I kind of feel bad about it because I think the Ultrix was probably deserving of being on the list. I don't know. But anyway, UMX Turbo Timber, awesome airplane. Awesome airplane. Absolutely worthy of being included on the list of best planes of 2020. For show. For show. All right. Next up on my list, and I think that this may be a surprise for some people, probably not, especially for me because I've talked about it quite a bit. Next up on my list is the Dynam PT-17. And, you know, if you had told me in at the end of 2019 that a Dynam airplane was going to make my list of best models of 2020, I probably would have told you that you were crazy. But here's the thing, right? For so long, there's been so many of us that have owned Dynam airplanes, that have flown them, that have put them together. And, you know, I think that the general consensus has always been like, Dynam airplanes are not the best airplanes out there, but they fly really good if you're good at modeling. And there was always these improvements that needed to be made, like the battery bays, just the general assembly, the overall construction of the airplane, the fact that you needed to put like 18 pounds of nose weight in their 4S planes because they recommend a 2200 battery when really it should have probably been like a 5000. The PT-17 to me represents a turning point for a company where Dynam for so long has been this company that represented good value if you were willing to work for it. You had to work to make that value work for you, if that makes sense. So yeah, they had these $180 airplanes, but you probably had to put $180, $200 worth of work into that airplane to make it fly well. You know, where they had underwhelming motors, underwhelming power systems, and I mean the paint was never all that great. The way that they went together was a little hokey. The foam may be a little weird. I mean, there was always a lot of funky issues. And the PT-17, they addressed so many of those issues all in like one, like, hey, look at what we're doing. And I don't want to call the Hawker Hunter a 2020 airplane because it's not going to be available for like widespread purchase until 2021. So that one is going to miss out on the list, but I think that one's going to be another representation where I think with the PT-17, we're seeing a pivot by a very well-known company in RC, but I think at the same time, what maybe like notorious, like just well known for all the wrong reasons. Yeah, maybe well known for all the wrong reasons. And that's what I really like about the PT-17 is it represents that pivot point of a turnaround in how Dynam is going to start building their airplanes, how they're starting to really listen to the people that have been giving them this feedback for so long, whether that is fan feedback, influencer feedback, you know, direct relationships that they have. They've reached out to me, you know, through Facebook Messenger. I've had several conversations with folks from Dynam basically surveying me. You know, and I'm not going to take credit for anything, but I think that speaks volumes for Dynam, you know, really starting to listen to their customers, what the customers want. And I think the PT-17 is representative of showing that they are listening and marks a lot of huge improvements. Are there still improvements to be made? Absolutely. But I think that in the next year or two, we really have the potential to see Dynam, you know, having a real Cinderella story. That that shows that, you know, you can have some moderate success and make some airplanes and make some money, but not necessarily have the best stuff out there. I think that they've got the potential to really blow us away with some new products here in the near future. And I hope that what we see in the PT-17, from the upgraded motor and power system, the construction, the scale detail, just the way that the plane is built, the way it flies, everything about that plane is amazing. And I hope that we continue to see it trending up like that, because I think that Dynam, like I was saying, can have one of the best Cinderella stories in RC that we've seen in a long time, where they're not obscure at all, but they can go from being like this budget, you know, where everybody knows them is synonymous with kind of crappy planes, to a company that we have, you know, seen go through the pains of making those crappy models into making some true quality models. And I'm really looking forward to the future for Dynam, for sure. Man, I look, I was having a conversation with Ryan earlier today, and we were talking about the potential for a B-25. Man, a B-25 from Dynam would be amazing, but here's the thing, right? And Ryan and I were in agreement on this. If you're gonna make a B-25, man, Dynam, you better take all of the cues that you're using in like the Hawker Hunter, the PT-17, whatever comes out in the future. You better make that your best model that you've ever made, ever. Don't take shortcuts. Don't go skimpy on the landing gear. Don't use crappy chicken wire struts. Don't even think about using those garbage retracts that you used in the past. You need to get away from your foam hinges and go with some nylon hinges. There are things that need to happen in a model like a B-25 where they could come out swinging and hit a grand slam with a model like a B-25 that I think everybody would love to see. But if they come out with it and it's garbage, it just sends them right back into the toilet. You know, just whoosh, go. Take your crap and get it out of my face. All right. So yeah, I think that could be a huge hit for them, but we'll see what they do. Anyway, Dynam PT-17 on my list of best airplanes of 2020. And it's just my opinion, guys. All right, we're gonna move on to the next plane. Are you guys ready? You guys ready for Dave's next plane on the list of best airplanes of 2020? All right, here it comes. The Freewing Jazz 39 or Yaz 39 Gripen. So there's a lot of reasons that I think that this deserves to be on the list. All right. So listen, I get that the Gripen is not everybody's cup of tea. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't like the way it looks. They don't like the color scheme. And that's fair. Is it the best looking airplane out there? Not really. I personally, I think it looks great. There's going to be some people that don't like it. There's going to be some people that want a different color scheme. And I get it. But I think that the ambition to have an airplane like the Gripen, you know, a new delta wing design, because Freewing had the, you know, they've got the Mirage, which is a delta wing. Great flying, small, super fast, and they had the Eurofighter. And there were quite a few people. Now, was the Eurofighter the best-selling plane that they had? Probably not, but they had the Eurofighter, and I think that a lot of people really enjoyed the Eurofighter. And when they discontinued it, there was a lot of people that were kind of upset. And now another thing that I believe to be true is the Eurofighter. I mean, that thing was a elevator, pitch only for the canards. But it was a good-looking plane. I think that the Eurofighter scratches the Gripen really, kind of scratches that itch for the people that wanted a Eurofighter to come back in EPO. And I think that they were pretty ambitious in doing like a full-flying roll and pitch canard. I mean, you can set it up to be pitch only. You can set it up to be roll only if you wanted it that way. And I think that you could set it up with the canards fixed, as long as they're, you could probably set it up as like a trim surface almost, as an elevator trim surface, and be able to fly the airplane just fine on the elevons alone. And it would probably fly great like that. But the presence of that plane in the air, I think it's very impressive looking. I love the way it flies. I love the roll rate. I mean, it's a good looking bird. You can do some really fun stuff with it. I think with the thrust vectoring, and again, just like the big Mig-29, I think that having that thrust vectoring as an available option adds another dimension to the flight characteristics of the airplane. So I think that that's a very neat feature that they have as an add-on if you want it. I think the way that they implemented that thrust vectoring, where if you want the thrust vectoring, you can buy that module and you don't have to tear the fuselage apart. You just install the thrust vectoring module instead of the straight tailpipe, and it makes it a lot easier to add that to the model, or to start off that way, right? So, that's one of the things that I wasn't real happy about the way that they did thrust vectoring on the Mig-29, is you've got to cut the model up to add thrust vectoring to the Mig-29, and I think that the Gripen is a much better candidate for thrust vectoring if that's something you want to try, because of the way that they designed that thrust vectoring model. I think that it was a good way to do that. So that is next on my list is the Freewing Gripen, and I think at $409 that thing hits a nice price point. But we haven't seen any in the wild yet, but I think that the FMS Rafale is really gonna is really gonna hit a lot of those itches the same way that the Gripen did for some people. I'm personally not a big fan of the yellow and black tiger stripe paint scheme of the Rafale, but I think that it has the potential of being an absolute beast of an airplane and competing directly with the Gripen. And when you look at the price point for the Rafale, where it sold at $409 and 0 cents, that is the exact same price point as the Gripen from Freewing. So that FMS is competing, and we may be sitting here a year from now talking about the FMS Rafale, because that is going to be a plane that I think is going to fall into the 2021 category, even though it was kind of released in 2020, but no one's going to have their hands on them until 2021. So we're going to wait until next year to talk about the Rafale. But I think that that's also going to be a great airplane, and I can't wait to see it in the air. As impressed as I am with the way that the Gripen flies with the full flying canards and the roll and pitch on the canards, that thing is awesome. It'll do a lot of cool stuff in the air. Maybe not everybody's cup of tea style wise, but I really like them. And I think that for people that dig the airframe, they're really going to love the way it flies. And I think that that was something that a lot of people were concerned with was, is it going to fly well? And I think that most people that have flown the Gripen to this point have been pretty impressed with how it flies. So it makes its way into my top airplanes of 2020. Now, the last airplane on my list, and I know this is all of these are controversial and they're all my opinion, so it's cool, man. If you don't agree, it's cool. But the last airplane on my list is the E-flite P-51 1.5 meter Mustang. Now, man, I mean, there's going to be some people that agree, there's going to be some people that don't agree. Here's why I'll tell you this made my list, and it made the last, so does it mean it's the top? I don't know. I don't know that I'd say that it's my top choice, but it's pretty freaking high up there, right? The E-flite P-51, number one, from the being a model, Mustangs are great. Everybody likes Mustangs. And I think that, their collaboration with FMS to make that 1.5 meter P-51, construction, power system, smart, all that stuff aside, man, this thing, it's a great size. And the presence in the air is amazing. That airplane flies incredibly well. It's deceivingly fast. Because it's a little bigger, it doesn't look like it's hauling the mail the way it is. But I'll tell you, when that thing rips down the runway, that is a fast airplane. It is a fast airplane. The way that it maneuvers, the very scale roll rate, it's a beautiful plane. And I think that some people may be put off by like the blue, the blue paint with the invasion stripes, but I think that P-51 Mustang looks amazing. Some people love it, some people hate it, and there's kind of no middle camp there. There's no middle ground. You either love it or you hate it. And I think that that's why that P-51 was such a polarizing plane. Now, we can get into price points and stuff like that too, so I think that there's some points of contention, and some are valid, that maybe that thing was priced a little high. Yeah, I mean, maybe it is priced a little high, but it also brings forward a lot of really cool innovations, and at least from, if my memory serves me correctly, this was one of the first planes to really showcase the Spectrum Smart ecosystem in its entirety. Where the inclusion of the AR-637T, it was the first plane on the market with the AR-637T, the first plane on the market with an Avian Smart ESC, the first time that we were ever able to see like how that ecosystem is going to work when I use a smart battery with a smart ESC with a smart receiver, all feeding back into a smart transmitter, and all of the information that I'm getting without adding any telemetry sensors at all. I'm getting motor RPM, I'm getting battery temperatures, I'm getting individual cell voltages, I'm getting ESC temps, I'm getting current, I'm getting all kinds of great information. I'm getting altitude on an AR-637T, not the TA that's included, but there's so much great information that's being fed back where even if you don't look at your radio, you can have call outs and things like that. And it's also good to go back and look at flight logs and see, what was my motor RPM? What was my current? What were these metrics? What was my min and max during this flight? So you can see how the airplane was performing. And if you do like continuous flight logs, you can actually log all that data on your SD card and go back and put it into like a log viewer and be able to see all that stuff. So I think that that marked a lot of great innovation from a technology perspective for that P-51 that we had not seen in any models previous to that. And, you know, I'm not going to say, like, look, there's, have other radio companies had telemetry? Yes. Did Spectrum have telemetry? Yes. Spectrum's had telemetry for years, but it was expensive. It required a lot of external modules. Most companies' telemetry systems require a lot of telemetry modules. You know, so if you want all that information from, say, a Jetty receiver, you're going to need to add like 4 or 5 different modules to that Jetty receiver to get all that information. If you want to add that to FR Sky, it's going to cost a lot of money. If you wanted to add that to Spectrum, well, maybe not a lot of money, but there's a lot of additional modules you'd need to get all that information. If you wanted to add all that information to a, you know, to the old Spectrum systems when we still had like the T1000 or whatever it was, you know, their little telemetry module, it was not cheap. And it required a lot of external sensors and external modules to be able to do it all. And, you know, from a technology perspective with that airplane, being able to get you all that information with nothing else added to the plane, I think that is where that thing shines. Not to mention just how well it cleans up, you know, with the gear door closed, the tail wheel, you know, retracts and the closing gear door. And yes, those were on the FMS iterations, you know, the 1450 and 1700 FMS iterations of the P-51, and the wing panels that just pop right off, you know. So being able to transport that plane for a larger airplane that would otherwise be a bit of a pain in the butt to get into a smaller car, I think the transportability of the E-flite P-51 was also, I mean, game changer? I don't know, maybe not. You haven't seen that on any other airplanes yet, but it might be coming soon. And I think that those pop-off wingtips, those were great. You know, I don't have to sit there and unscrew anything. All I do is just pull those wing panels off. When you get to the field, they pop on. I was a little skeptical as to how well those plastic, you know, retention nubs or whatever you want to call them, how well those were going to work in practical application. But now that I've owned the plane, I've flown it, I've taken it to the field, I've put the wingtips on, I've taken them off, the design works really well. And I am looking forward to seeing E-flite and even other companies using the same type of design on future airplanes because it works. It looks a little funky, but it works. It works well. So that is the last plane on my list for my list of best planes of 2020, the E-flite P-51 Mustang 1.5 millimeter. Full smart, awesome. So, Joe Habib, you know, too much technology, just put a good receiver in it. I mean, look, I think that that's another reason why I have to give a little bit of props to the E-flite P-51. And while we haven't seen it yet, because they're still coming out with models that utilize the AR-636, I think they had at least 2 or 3 models that they released this year that still had the AR-636 in them. You know, so you had the Twin 64A10, AR-636. You had the Blue Angels F-18, still has an AR-636. You know, there's... I think as we start moving into 2021, in fact, I think that the E-flite Blue Angel F-18 is probably the last model that you'll see that doesn't have a full smart implementation, from their cheapest models all the way up to their most expensive. So I mean, we just saw the release a couple of weeks ago, very under the table. All of their radio announcements, all their tech announcements have kind of been under the table, maybe with the exception of like the NX series transmitters, but they released the AR-8360 a bit under the table. They released the AR-630 a bit under the table. The AR-631 was also a bit under the table. The AR-631 is, basically the same thing as an AR-630, but it has that long antenna where you can place it anywhere in the model. You're not restricted to, keeping it like stuck behind a battery or something like that. So I think that as we start to see the old tech be retired and the airplanes that had that old technology in it get retired, we're going to start seeing every airplane, from the cheapest release to the most expensive airplanes that E-flite produces, all of their bind and fly models, I think, are going to have full smart implementations in them. They're going to have either a 631, maybe not a 630, but they're going to have a 631 or an AR-637T, and in some cases, maybe even an 8360, depending on how big they go with these bind and flies. You're going to have one of those three receivers, and you're going to have an AV and ESC. That is your power system going into the future. Whether or not they're going to continue to use like Spectrum branded motors, like the P-51 actually came with a Spectrum branded motor. And I don't know that you're going to continue to see that, but I think you will continue to see the ESCs and the receivers with the full complement of smart technology. I don't think that that's something they're going to go away from. I think that they're fully embracing it at this point, and everything that they sell from now on is going to have it. Yes. So my wife asked the question, can I adjust the video doorbell where it's no longer picking up the cars that go by? Yes, I can. Completely unrelated to airplanes or anything else. Yes, I can adjust the motion zones of the of our video doorbell. Yes, the V1200. If we get into kind of honorable mentions, I picked 10 airplanes that came out this year that I think were, airplanes that were worthy of the list. The V1200 probably deserves a space on that list. Great airplane. And I think that if that's something that you're looking for, the V1200 is awesome. But at the same time, I think that the appeal to the audience, the V1200 has a very niche audience, at least in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the V1200 appeals to a lot more people than I think. But I think that the V1200, there's a limited audience of people that are going to appreciate what that airplane's all about. Maybe they want a super high-speed airplane, but are they for everybody? I don't think so. I think that there are other airplanes out there with a wider appeal than the V1200. Just my opinion. Oh, Randy, are they making those phone calls now? Dude, EQ, did LX release any new models for 2020? All right. So, with that being the conclusion of my list, you know, what were my favorite airplanes of 2020? I want to come back and see what you guys liked that came out in 2020. You know, there's going to be some that I missed. I know that Hobby King, man, the Kingcraft Stearman, I think is awesome. That's an awesome plane, and I probably could have easily added that to the list of my favorite airplanes, but I haven't. I still need to see one, but it looks like a beautiful plane. Oh, Pearl Jam, man. I don't think anybody ever will make a Harrier. Not because it's not an awesome plane, but the complexities of flying a Harrier. I think that everyone that could design a Harrier knows better, if that makes sense. If I were to, you know, let's say just from a business perspective, if I'm going to make a VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing airplane, I have to be acutely aware of how many of those airplanes are going to end up in pieces. Sorry, had to let the dog out. So those airplanes are gonna get, yeah, they're gonna. I might want one just for the novelty of having a Harrier, but I have zero expectation that it's gonna fly very well at all, because it's so difficult. That would be so difficult to model and model well, you know. And people are going to want it to have like an auto hovering mode. I mean, there's so many problems that come from that. As much as I would love it, I would love to have a Harrier, but man, people would wreck that thing left and right, and there'd be nothing but warranty claims and people bitching and complaining, this model handles so bad. Well, you got to be a helicopter pilot and a fixed wing pilot, and you have to understand how to transition from horizontal flight to vertical flight. What a nightmare. Yeah, OV10 Bronco, I would agree that the OV10, I think a lot of people really like the OV10. It wasn't my, that's one of those things that's not my cup of tea, and that's why this is all opinions, right? I mean, everybody's got one, and they're all stinky. I think the OV10 was a good model. It was. It flies great. It really does. I don't like it. It looks like a helicopter with wings. To me. That's kind of what the OV10 reminds me of. It looks like a helicopter with wings, and I'm just not a fan of the OV10 in general. It's not something that I'm going to be running out to buy. But for the people that like OV10s, yeah, it's a great model. It's great. Now, I mean, there's other ones too. The Goblin from Hobby King. The Goblin, I think, is a cool plane. But when you look at that Goblin up against the other planes that came out from other manufacturers, You know, do I think that the Goblin deserves to be on a list of best airplanes of 2020? Nah, not really. All right. I mean, the Goblin, yeah, it's fast. I think the Havoc was last year. If the Havoc was 2020, like to me, I like the Havoc better than the Goblin. But that's just my opinion. And I also focused on just electrics, right? Now, if we were to go into, say, balsa models and things like that, I think that the Bighorn from OMP would deserve a place on the list. I think that the OMP Bighorn is awesome. I think the fact that it's, you know, kind of a plug and play take on balsa models where it already comes with all the servos and everything pre-installed, ready to go. I think that the OMP Bighorn is a great model and probably should have made my list now that I'm looking back on it. So the Habu, as I think that the Habu probably does deserve an honorable mention because of how ambitious it is. I think that the Habu is probably one of the more ambitious planes that, from a marketing perspective, not necessarily as an airplane. The Habu as an airplane flies great. But I think from a marketing perspective, the Habu was probably one of the more ambitious planes that E-flite has tried to sell. You know, the Habu as a trainer wouldn't be my first choice, and I don't think it would be most people's first choice as a trainer. But I think for someone that wants to, that has, so that I have a couple of guys that I can think of right out of the gate that I think the Habu would have been a great trainer plane for. And these are folks that we know. You know, so I think that Spencer Keith would have been a great candidate for a Habu as their first plane, period. I think that LJ Hobby Life probably would have been a great candidate for the Habu as their first airplane. Hamilton's Hangar, Shea Hamilton. I think that the Habu would have been a great plane for Shea Hamilton as their first plane. But I think for most people that get into this hobby, you know, and the reason that I say that is because those few folks that I just mentioned, they are very skilled, and even though they don't have a whole lot of time on airplanes, they transition to jets so fast that I don't even know that they were ever really interested in flying prop planes to begin with. And for people like that have no interest in hobby or in prop planes, I think that the idea of having a jet trainer that's capable of slow, predictable flight on 3S packs is great. But I don't know that it's a great first plane for everybody. I think that it's a great first plane for some people, but it's not a great first plane for everybody. You know, there's some planes that I will say, like, it's a great first plane for everybody. And that would be like the Apprentice, the Mini Apprentice, the Aero Scout. Great first planes for everyone. In that order. I think that the Apprentice still today is the best trainer plane ever made. And that's a long, distinguished list of trainer planes. You know, I think that the Apprentice airframe, the way it flies, the power system they put in it, you know, what it's capable of, it's probably one of the best trainers that's ever been made, period. Even going back into the foamy days, or into the balsa days. The Apprentice is awesome. And what more can you say? It's one of the best trainer planes that's ever been made. The Mini Apprentice is just a small version of the Apprentice. And it's also awesome. You know, and now we've got things like the Aero Scout. I think that the Aero Scout, it flies great. It doesn't have the speed, you know, that you're going to get out of like an Apprentice, for example, but it still does respectable. And I think the fact that the Aero Scout has the air, I mean, it's a pusher prop, right? So instead of like a tractor style, it's a pusher. And I think that caters itself to really well to the trainer environment, because like the Bixler, you know, the Aero Scout I think is great because you can smash it right into the nose and not kill the airplane. So yeah, and Ryan, I don't disagree with that. I think that the Habu can be a great first plane for the right person. And I mean, I've taken it out. I've flown it. I've flown it on 3S. I've flown it on 4S, and I have done what I would consider to be the rounds, you know, the way that I would train somebody, the way that I would fly if I were training someone how to fly an RC plane. I mean, it's got incredible slow handling characteristics. It's got, you know, some, like the leading edge, it's kind of got leading edge slats built into the wingtips, you know, to mitigate tip stalls. I mean, there's some great aerodynamic characteristics of the Habu that I think lend themselves very well to a beginner-friendly plane. You know, so I don't disagree that a beginner can fly the Habu and do well with it. And I think if that's how they learn, if they learn on a Habu, they're going to do well with any other plane after that. Where the same can't be said for like an Apprentice. I think that there's a different, it changes your transitional plane. You know, if you start on a Habu, my second recommend, you know, what I would recommend as a second plane would be completely different than what I would recommend if you started on an Apprentice. So, you know, can it be a good first airplane? Can a beginner find success with a Habu? Absolutely, I think they can. But it's just a different mindset. The way that you fly the Habu is different than how you'd fly an Apprentice, if that makes sense. Like I'm not going to teach someone how to fly a Habu the same way I would teach them how to fly an Apprentice. But yes, I think that with the sim, you know, that comes with the ready to fly version of the Habu, I think that offers a great learning tool. You know, that before you take the plane out and fly it, you should do that. And I think that the Habu is one where at least for me, I would not recommend the Habu to somebody that doesn't have a coach who's familiar with EDF jets to help train them. I would want a trainer if I was going to recommend a Habu. Like, I would want to make sure that they have an accessible, flight instructor to teach them how to fly that plane. But I think that if they get the Habu and they can perfect the Habu and they can transition from 3S to 4S with the Habu and perfect it in 4S, I think that pilot comes out of that airplane better equipped to be able to fly more airplanes than someone who has only flown an apprentice, if that makes sense. And I do agree, the Arrows 50mm Viper, that thing is awesome. The Arrows 50mm Viper to me is impressive the same way that the UMX Turbo Timber is impressive. And I know that there are, so like the MiG-15, for example, is an EDF UMX plane. The Citation, another plane that was released in 2020 that I didn't have on my list. UMX jet, but are they awesome? I don't know. I mean, was it cool? Yeah, but it's not like knock your socks off awesome. I think that the Viper, the Viper to me, the Viper to me is what a UMX jet should be. It's not real big, I mean, what's it? Somewhere like a 24, maybe 30-inch wingspan. It's not real big. It uses a nice small battery. It's very simple as far as the radio. I think it's a 3-channel. I don't think it has a rudder. So it's a real simple toss and boss 50mm, so it's smaller than like your 64mm offerings from most manufacturers. And the performance is fantastic on a 3S. I think that a lot of folks were a little worried about how it was going to fly on 3S until they flew it on 3S. And then they were like, dang, this thing does really well. It's an impressive little plane. It's an impressive little plane for what it is. And to me, that's where I think, like, if you want to make a little UMX style jet, I think that's where it needs to be. Not like the Citation, but more like the size of the Viper. Is it truly UMX? No, it's a little bigger than a UMX plane. Not actually by much. Wingspan and wise, but I think that's like the perfect mix of small size and affordability. And yeah, absolutely. I think that the Arrows Viper, very cool plane, but not necessarily on my list of best planes of 2020. Yeah, so you make me a great big twin 70 Citation. I think that would be awesome. Throw me out a twin 70 big Citation, like 1100, 1200 millimeter wingspan, maybe longer. Yeah, I mean, shit, a Citation's got a pretty long wingspan anyway. So, I mean, that'd probably be closer to like a 1400 than a twin 70, but that would be awesome. I mean, twin 80 would be even better. No, Victor. I only explained it once. This video will be available for replay later. And I agree, man. I think that Bobby and Ryan's video on the Citation was great. I think that their video presentation on the UMX Turbo Timber was great. And there's been a lot of good videos that have come out lately that, or at least in the last year, that I think have really showcased a lot of the planes that we're talking about. The only one that's on the list that really hasn't gotten a lot of love because there's not a lot of people that have it in their hands yet is really that HSD Cessna 182. And I think that as more people get their hands on that 182, I think that, yes, that's going to be a great airplane. I think that you're going to see a lot of folks getting that plane. At least I hope so, man. It's so beautiful that I hope that more people, number one, look at HSD for something other than big, giant turbine transition EDF jets, or even small turbines, like beginner turbines and advanced, what was I saying? Either beginner turbines or advanced EDFs. I think that's really what people look at HSD for. And I think that HSD Cessna 182 opens them up to a broader market, and I hope that they are able to realize that from a marketing perspective. The Flex Innovations F100 was a very cool plane. But again, it's one of those things where I've seen it fly, I've seen the performance, and it just wasn't, to me, it wasn't like mega impressive. Where most of the other planes that we talked about tonight, there was something about them that made that plane stand out to me amongst all the other planes in the RC market. Or there was something about that plane. Either the company had done something radically different, or there was something special about the plane itself. And that was really what I was looking at when I was picking my list. Fred Barron, how you doing tonight, sir? Good to see you. And absolutely, if you guys want to see an example of every plane that we mentioned tonight, head over to Pilot Ryan Media. Y'all know his YouTube channel. Go to Pilot Ryan Media and check out all the videos he's done for 2020. Every plane that we mentioned today, you've seen on the Pilot Ryan Media channel. I've been able to make videos of a lot of them, but not all of them. There's a few on there that I haven't flown, but I've just been so impressed with them when I see them at the field that I'm convinced that they are just awesome airplanes. No, I believe that. So I don't think that. I mean that Citation. I have flown one of the Citations, and I didn't like it. I'll be honest. I wasn't a fan. So Eric Hill, we talked about the OMP Bighorn. I think that the OMP Bighorn, kind of looking back on it, all the planes that I included on my list, and I should have said best foam planes. I should have prefaced it with best foam planes of 2020. I think that the Bighorn absolutely deserves a spot on a list of best planes of 2020 because, and I mentioned this earlier, it's a plug and play balsa. How awesome is that? At a price that you would expect to see for a plug and play foam model. I think that OMP is great. Yeah. So, I thought the OMP Bighorn was a great model. The other thing that I've been really happy with OMP this year is I think the OMP helicopters are also awesome. Yeah, Pearl Jam, I would agree with that. I think that I hope that now that we're seeing Motion RC kind of take over. I mean, it sounds bad, right? Well, I mean, they're becoming a distributor for VQ and selling them exclusively in the United States under the Nexa brand. And there may be other, the same with E-flite. Like E-flite is not all made by FMS, but a lot of it is. They may be doing something similar with the Nexa brand that E-flite does, where it's not all VQ models that are going to fall under that Nexa branding. It'd be interesting, and I would appreciate seeing it, to be honest with you, if Motion kind of takes that step of releasing some Nexa models that have that are fully plug and play, like really, no kidding, plug and play models. They've got the motor, they've got the components, between like Freewing and whatever. Yeah, I mean, they've got good servos, they've got good motors available that they can release under the Admiral branding and include that with the model, or even have it factory OEM installed. Like, you don't have to think about any of it. This Nexa model comes with this gear and retracts and struts, and this is the motor and the ESC, and here it's already got all the servos pre-installed. That would be fantastic. And I think with the coverings that they're doing now, that if they could get them at the right price point, that could be a big resurgence into balsa modeling. I think that, at least in my opinion, I think that one of the reasons that foam has been so dominant since it came out is that you've got a lot more flexibility in the design with a molded aircraft. I can take that mold, I can machine it any way I want, and I can make the shape of that aircraft any way I want. But through those same kind of design concepts, balsa took a little longer, I think, to adopt some of those newer manufacturing styles of like laser cutting and CNC stuff like that. But I think that we're seeing a lot more innovative balsa designs now, where a lot of those shapes that we weren't seeing with balsa models in the past, where balsa has had kind of a boxy shape. You weren't really getting real scale airplane. You could get close, but they weren't the best. And I think that what we're seeing here lately in some of the newer balsa designs that are coming out is that through the use of laser CNC cuts and more innovative ways of assembling balsa models, that we're getting much more scale aircraft than we've seen in the past. And if we can get balsa to be in a comparative price point to foam, I think that a lot of people would enjoy flying balsa. And that's just my opinion on it. What is up, Dave's RC? How you doing, brother? Good to see you tonight. Yeah, George, I think that could be a problem for some of like the balsa purists out there that want moving the mark. It definitely creates.
Fat girl.
What is this?
It's a fat girl.
Got a dog thrown at me. So.
Who loves her daddy?
So Amy's off camera. She's saying hi.
Hi.
Hi. So, yeah, I think that a lot of the balsa purists are going to want it in a gas model. They're going to want gas. They're going to want nitro. They're going to want like big 4-stroke models. To me, especially when we're talking like smaller balsa models, so like the 1.5 wingspan and lower balsa models. There's some 4-stroke motors that work well in those, but I think for the most part, those are 2-strokes. And, the only models that I like gas in anymore
is your butt.
Is my butt. So, yeah, the only models that I like gas motors in anymore are like your big models. Where you're putting in like a big 4-stroke gas motor and that thing sounds like a big Harley, like the big gnarly gas motors.
Maybe you want to come with Mama?
On the smaller airplanes, you almost have to go with like a 2-stroke, whether it's gas or nitro. You're going with a 2-stroke motor, which sounds like a freaking weed whacker, man. And that was one of the reasons that I never, really liked the small, like 10 and 15 size glow engines, is because they sounded terrible, man. I much prefer the electric airplanes for that kind of stuff. Mr. Reckenroy, how you doing tonight? David, yourself, how you doing, buddy? Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. Dude, that would be cool if you could get an electric that sounds like a big nasty 4-stroke. And listen, guys, just like most people in our hobby, I really enjoy the sound of a big nasty Sato 4-stroke motor. Those are impressive as hell to me. I love, a big nasty 4-stroke, but they're super pricey. So, it's just something that I'm probably not going to be into. Yeah, very expensive. Very expensive, Michael Reitza. So I'll tell you a plane that I saw recently that I am probably going to get at some point in the near future. And since I have, you know, the window kind of pulled up here and I can pull it up. Uh-oh. What happened? Hopefully I'm still here. Can everybody still see me? Okay. Yeah, the playback window, it still says excellent connection, but it says that an error occurred. This is like my little YouTube thing. We only got a few minutes left anyway, and we'll be cutting it off here just in a bit. But, yeah, man, I love gas from a sound perspective, especially big Sato 4-strokes. Big Sato 4-strokes, they speak my language. But not everybody is a gas guy. So here's one that I'm going to show you guys. And I think that this thing is amazing. And some of you guys may be like, what? And some of you may be like, dude, I would definitely jump all over that. And that is, it's a Nexa model. So it's a balsa. And that is the Nexa G58. So this is a Baron G58 model, which I think is just one of the classic twin engine civil aviation planes out there. And this thing looks amazing. This is a great looking plane. You know, cool looking pilot. I mean, they did a really good job with this thing. And whether you go gas or you go electric, I think that this is just an awesome looking plane. So this is another one of those like balsa planes that I feel like I'm gonna get at some point. I don't have one today. I don't have one right now, but I just think that it's freaking fantastic looking. But not everybody, I get it, not everybody likes civil aviation planes. I happen to really like civil aviation planes. Yeah, it's got retracts. You know, full retracts, full struts. You know, in this particular instance, it's got dual gas motors, but I would do it dual electric with opposing, you know, counter-rotating props. I think that the Baron 58 is a great airplane, and I would love to have that thing in my stable. And it's $429. That's what I like about the Nexa models is for their size. I mean, I think they're priced right. That thing is $1,760. This is almost an 1,800 millimeter plane. So we can switch back over there. I mean, it's $1,760. This is not a small airplane. That's a big motor. So, you know, almost 1,800 millimeters for this thing, and $429. I mean, once you add the motors, the ESCs, batteries, etc., yeah, it's gonna get a little pricey. And servos. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you have to buy in addition to the airplane. But I just think that that thing looks amazing. Yeah, that's a heck of an upgrade for that twin star there, Jermaine Spencer. How you doing tonight, man? Hey, $700 in the air is still. I mean, at some point, you're. A lot of people are going to be perfectly happy with flying cheap phone models the entire time that they're in this hobby. And while that's awesome, I think that there's, especially when you start getting into nicer, more scale detailed airplanes, I mean, I think that it's kind of a natural progression to want to get a model that the quality is a step above what you can achieve when you're talking a foam model. And I think that that Beechcraft, that Baron G58, that's one of those where, to me, that's that step that I'm looking for. So yes, it's $700, $800 in the air. But there's a lot of folks out there that are putting a lot more money than that up. That's for sure. What's up, Deuces Wild? Hey, man, I don't think I've seen you on here in a while. How you doing? Hopefully you are feeling well, my friend. Yeah, all these planes are expensive, especially when you start getting into the bigger ADF jets, bigger balsa planes. I mean, like I said, this is an 1800 millimeter balsa twin, so of course it's going to be a little expensive. Moving the mark, NX6, 8, or 10. If you can afford a 10, buy it. If you can afford an NX6, buy the NX8. To me, and I love Spectrum and what they bring to the table for the most part, but I think that the NX6 was priced so dumb. When the 8 is only $40 more, why would anybody ever buy the NX6? It's just puzzling to me. So I think that if you can't afford the 10, but you can afford the 6, then get the 8. But if you can afford the 10, get the 10. And the reason I put it like that is I wouldn't recommend the NX6 to anybody because the 8 is only $40 more. Save your pennies for another couple of weeks and spend $40 more and get the NX8. Not that the NX6 is a bad radio. I just think that the NX8 is a better radio for $40 more. So why not spend another $40 and get it? But my recommendation is always to buy as much radio as you can afford, and always think of your transmitter as an investment into your enjoyment in the hobby, not a fee that you're going to pay over and over again like airplanes. So airplanes all have a not very, I mean, I won't call it predictable, but airplanes all have an expiration date on them. You may not know when that expiration date is, but it's coming. Every airplane has an expiration date. The transmitters can last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, how many guys do you know that are still flying, like a Spectrum DX7S or something that came out like 8 or 9 years ago, and it still works great. So always buy as much transmitter as you can afford. That's my opinion, because the transmitter is an investment, and I'd rather have more channels that I don't need than to need more channels that I don't have. Because now I got to buy a whole nother radio, right? So I think that there's way too many folks out there that are getting into this hobby that get snookered into the idea of this beginner plane, this beginner radio. I'm kind of at a point where I would recommend that anybody that's getting into this hobby for the first time, do not buy an airplane and a separate radio. Get a ready-to-fly model like an Apprentice STS, Habu, Cub, whatever. Get a ready-to-fly model that comes with like a DXS or a DXE crap radio, right? $50 garbage radio. Learn how to fly with it and decide whether or not you like the hobby. And then before you buy your second airplane, invest in a really good radio that you can carry with you. Because look, most people are going to get into this hobby and they're going to dive into the deep end of the pool. And in the first year, they're going to be spending thousands of dollars on airplanes. Well, you know what? Instead of buying those two planes, hold off and get you something like an IX-12 or an NX-10 that's going to last the entire time you're flying RC. You know what I'm saying? Invest in something that's going to follow you your entire time in the hobby. Don't spend money on something that's only going to last for your first 5 or 6 models and then be a waste. Where the NX6, I think, was a good, conceptually, it's awesome if it was priced right. But I think when the NX8 only costs 40 more bucks, it makes no sense to buy the NX6. Which is unfortunate, because I think that there is a good market for an NX6, especially with that 7th digital channel, being able to turn safe select on and off on a 6-channel airplane. I think that's huge and could have been an awesome selling point for the NX6. But the awesome selling point for the NX8 is it's only $40 more. So why would you ever go here when you could go here? Just my 2 cents. All right, guys. Well, listen, we're at 10:03. It is time to say good evening. Hasta la vista, all that good stuff. Be sure to check out our good friend Ray at Gooniac33 Fiery Booty YouTube channel. He's going to be going live here in about 15 minutes. A little less, about 12 minutes, maybe 11 now. Yeah, it's 10:04. He'll be going live here in about 11 minutes. Yeah, Ryan, look, I get it. The NX6 is cool. I love that they put that 7th channel on there for people that buy, that want to get into bind and fly. But it just doesn't, it doesn't make sense to me, man. I really wish that they had priced it maybe another $50 cheaper than it is. That's all. Make it be more of a gap than $40. It's got to be a bigger gap than $40. No one, I can't recommend an NX6. Not in good faith. I can't in good faith recommend an NX6 to anybody when $40 get you 2 more channels and a better radio. Yeah, exactly, Pearl Jam. Exactly. So anyway, guys, check out Gooniac right after the show tonight. Tomorrow night, be sure to check out our good friend Jeff's Custom RC. Hopefully he's feeling better tomorrow. He had to miss last week's show, and that sucks. We missed you, Jeff. So we're looking forward to seeing you. Be sure to check out on Wednesday night our good friend Shay Hamilton on Hamilton's Hangar. And that leads right into Hump Day RC with GB Linden. Thursday nights, our good friend Kenny, he'll rock you all night long. And that, Kenny keeps going right until Dave's RC starts on Friday. We love Dave and Dave's RC. Be looking forward to that show on New Year's Day. New Year's Day, Dave's RC. I hope you're ready. So this week, New Year's Eve special, Kenny. Saturday, Pilot Ryan. The OG. And on Sunday, we got the Merry Boozers. Guys, be sure to tune in next week. We're going to be talking. I know normally I'm going to wait until the second week of January to do our fly-in. Next week, I'm going to dig into the new FAA rules. And on our next show, we're going to be talking about these new FAA rules because I think it's a discussion we need to have. But until then, you guys all have a great week. We will see you all in like 5 minutes on Gooniac Show, but we'll see you all next week. Everybody have a great night.